Hello. To honor Microsoft's 40th birthday, we are going to be taking a look at Windows 1.0, the very first version of Windows ever released. This software was released in November of 1985. That is 40 years ago this year. And as a result, it essentially turned into everything we know of as Windows today. There are still some remnants of Windows 1.0 in our computers to this day, such as Notepad, Paint, although I'll get into how that's the version that's in Windows 1 isn't quite the ancestor of the software we have today. There's another version I will show you that is the ancestor of what we know today. But you know, the Notepad, the Paint, even Microsoft Write is a ancestor of an application that we still have on some of our computers today, which is WordPad. It's not used as much because people often have Office 365 accounts these days, and they just use Microsoft Office. But back in the day, back when Windows 1 came out, there was no Microsoft Office for Windows. That didn't come out till Windows 2.0. But let's take a look at some of these applications. It's asking me to capture. Unfortunately, my mouse is not going to work because of the screen capture software I am using. It interferes with VirtualBox's screen capture software, not screen capture, keyboard and mouse capturing abilities, so I can use the keyboard, but I cannot use the mouse. So some of the applications may not work as well as if I'd had a mouse, but I will still show you some of them. So as mentioned, you know, there's Calculator, which still exists to this day in Windows. It looks very different, but functionally works essentially the same. 7 times 3 equals 21. It doesn't really change very much. You can copy, paste. That's all this application could do, but it was a very rudimentary graphical calculator versus what you would have done back with MS-DOS. And you can use this operating system entirely from the keyboard. To access menus, you'd hit Alt, and the space bar will open that little tiny menu on the side there to allow you to, you know, close applications. This was your calendar. You had your standard date format here. You could set alarms if you wanted to. You could change the date format to month, so you could see the month down to the specific day by clicking on a specific day. Enter your data at your specific time. Let's go to movies. And it's kind of crazy to see that date in there. Friday, June 13th, 2025. That is when this is essentially being done. It's kind of crazy. It's actually not Friday, it's Saturday, and it's the 14th, but I'm not exactly sure why it didn't do that. But it does still oddly work. Oh, actually, I just realized I changed the date. So yes, it did work. It's just I changed the date to the 13th to do this. And you could save it, you could do whatever you needed to. And it was just a simple calendar. You have your card file. This is essentially just another Notepad-esque application. I don't really know why you would use this over Notepad other than maybe there were some applications that supported card files that were not from Notepad, but there is a reason card file no longer exists. It's because it really was never a widely used application, even back then. Something we all take for granted these days is the use of a clock. Windows had to have a dedicated application to show you the time, because back then the only other way you could do it was to go into DOS and type in the time command. And that didn't change constantly. You had to type time each time you wanted to see what the time was. So this is actually kind of something that people didn't usually have on their computers. It was kind of interesting when they added that feature to be able to see the clock in real time. And this does, I can't really, actually I might be able to show you. Let's icon it. That time does change in the lower right hand corner. I can move my mouse around here so you can see it. So right here, this is still correct for a time. You could actually still use your clock like that. It's kind of a weird way to use your clock, but you could use it. I'm going to close the clock. Next up, we have the control panel, which I'm sure many of you know. The control panel was recently removed from Windows 11. That said, if you upgraded from Windows 10 to Windows 11, you do still have your control panel, or at least parts of your control panel, because you upgraded, and only because you upgraded. If you didn't upgrade, you wouldn't have those little tiny pieces of the control panel remaining. But to this day, this can modify applications and settings, not applications, but settings in Windows today if you use a 16-bit application layer to execute applications. You can still run Windows 1 apps on Windows 11, as crazy as that sounds. And many of it still works, including printing, which blows my mind that I can print. I can just say print, and it will spool it, it will go to the printer, and it will know what that printer interface is and how to send it to it, and how to route it through Windows spooling services. Because the spooling service for Windows has not, at its root, changed in 40 years. Which is mind-boggling to me, at least. That stuff literally hasn't changed. But you can change quite a few things in here. You can change, you can add a new printer. I don't have a printer to add, or a font to add, but you can add fonts, which was a very big deal back then, because originally, if you had a graphical interface, you had to install all of your fonts, your printers, your drivers. Everything had to be installed when you installed the operating system or the interface. But with Windows, you didn't have to. You could add stuff later, like printers or fonts. You can also change your screen colors, which to this day, some of this makes some changes. In Windows 11, I noticed that if you change the window background, or the window background, if you change that for a split second when you're opening applications, it will show the color that you set there for that split second before the program actually loads in all of its new styles. But it will actually show it. Most of the rest of this will not do anything in Windows 11, but that does, which is kind of crazy to think about. Another thing that does change things in Windows 11 is the cursor blink and double click, as well as when you go into the preferences for the mouse to change to left-handed mode, still works. kind of really crazy. After Control Panel, we're going to flip over to Notepad. This is an application that I'm sure everyone has used to some degree. If they've used computers in the past 25, 30 years, 40 years, you probably have used this program, and it hasn't changed all that much. Today it looks quite a bit different because you got tabs and things like that, but that's a very modern change. The only major changes that occurred in 30 years was the ability to add in a font window to select and change your font sizes, the ability to find and replace text in a document, and essentially just tabs. There's also emoji support and all that kind of stuff that was added, but that's under the hood. When you're typing, it doesn't really feel any different. That's just so that you could copy and paste things into it. So essentially, it really hasn't changed, other than the few things I just listed, in 40 years. And it still saves as .txt files just like it used to back in the day. After that, you've got Microsoft Paint, which this is not the ancestor of Microsoft Paint that we know today. The ancestor to Microsoft Paint is a program called PC Paintbrush, and I will show that to you because I do have it, but this is not what that was. This predates that. This was made by Microsoft and not by a third party. So the PC Paintbrush was created by a third-party company that made it, and Microsoft bought it from that third-party company. You can actually draw with your keyboard and mouse, however crazy as that sounds, in Paint. I'm not going to bore you by continuing to do that, but as you can see there, you actually can do that, which is kind of weird. You can change your font size because you can add text in. You could change the styles, the palettes, the patterns. So like this is the pattern if I use the fill tool or things like that, because this didn't even support color. It was all black and white. You can also zoom in, zoom out, add a grid, stuff like that. But that's about all you could do with this. This also saved files in the MSP format, which kind of is funny. If you find one of those today, it's going to look like a patch because MSP today is used as the Microsoft patch file to patch Microsoft Windows. So it's good. So if you try to load that on a modern computer, it's just going to look like a broken patch. You also have Reversi. This is one of the very few games that was ever released for Windows 1.0. Yes, it is possible to beat it. There's that old idiom that it's impossible to beat this. It is possible, just really, really hard. But it's an old game, and this stayed in Windows until Windows 3.1 when it was removed and replaced with FreeCell instead of Reversi. But that's just all it is. You could set your skill, which again, like I said, even on beginner, this is near impossible to beat the computer. You can ask for a hint, which by the way, that's the only way I have ever been able to beat it, is by using the game's hint system. other than Reversi, Windows didn't come with any other games, but I will show you a couple more that I have managed to find after we're done with all of these applications here. This is the spooler. Back in the day, this is how you would print. Like I said, it's amazing that the protocols for printing hasn't changed in 40 years. An application would cue the spooler, and then the spooler would then do everything it needs to do to print. And believe it or not, that's exactly how Windows printing works today. There is a program called spooler.exe that is a service that runs on Windows and does this purpose to this day. Beyond the spooler, we have the terminal. This is one of the applications that would allow you to connect to outside devices from the device that you're on. And I've actually set up a cool little trick where I have used the settings in VirtualBox to pass through my physical COM port to this virtual machine so that I could show you that this still works. And in fact, you could even use this trick to get your Windows 1.0 to be on the internet, which didn't even technically exist, at least in the form we use it today, in 1985. But you can do that today. And the way you would do that is you'd open up your settings, set your terminal information, which I'm going to go ahead and do right now. Set your communication settings to the serial settings required by your device. In my case, I'm going to use a network switch as my go-between device. I have a Cisco small business switch here in my apartment. I'll click connect. And I'm in. I'm on my switch. And I'm going to go ahead and use SSH. I have a Linux VM set up on a Raspberry Pi. And now we're going to use a text-based web browser called Lynx to get to Google. I know it's a convoluted way to do this, but as you can see, it is possible to access the internet on Windows 1.0. Now, I'm going to quickly just back out of this and log off of my switch so that it's not connected and logged in. After that, there's only one other built-in application, and that's Microsoft Write. This is the predecessor to what we know of as WordPad, which still exists, I think, on computers today. I know it existed up through Windows 8.1, and I believe through Windows 10. I'm not 100% sure that it's bundled with Windows 11 anymore, though. But it is a very old application that essentially was your word processor. And it did quite a bit I could turn on my ruler, and it looks kind of funny, but this is essentially the predecessor to, not predecessor, well, yeah, predecessor, the ancestors of modern word processing. And it works exactly the same as you might think. You can set bold, you could set italics if you wanted to, and it just works. And these files, so if I were to save this, I can actually save it. Forget, it has to be long, it has to be a short name. It actually saves it as .doc files that your modern computer can open. It's going to look really weird in Microsoft Word, but the weirdest part is if you were to open it in LibreOffice, it'll know exactly what it is and display it right. And that's all the built-in applications. Now we're going to go over to this folder here. This is a compilation of applications that I have found that to varying degrees work with Windows 1.0. And there's a couple that we're not going to open because they simply do not work. They crash Windows. I think those were based on were made for Windows 2.0 and not Windows 1.0, and kind of over time people have claimed they worked on Windows 1 and never did. This is again one of those very few games that did exist for Windows 1.0. It's called Balance of Power. And I believe it's similar to Risk. I don't really know how to play it, but it was made, it does work. You can do a whole bunch of things in this game, like lending military aid, attacking nations, doing other things, and you get to pick your side, whether you're Russia or the USA. It's really a relic of the Cold War, and it came out during the Cold War. 1986, we were still in the Cold War. So, and you can, basically you could do things with different countries and it'll say what your relations are, the hostility, all that kind of stuff. I don't really know how to play it very well. Envision, this is an application that is for drawing. I'm not going to be able to show you because I don't have a working mouse. But that is basically what this does, is it creates line graphs and other things. This is an application called PageMake, and it essentially, get it all through, is kind of like your Microsoft Publisher. It's a really, really basic, like, tool to create flyers and things like that. It's really, really basic, but that's essentially what it does. This one, this is called PC Paint or PC Paintbrush. This is what ultimately turned into Microsoft Paint many, many years ago. And only most recently was really changed. If you used Microsoft Paint anywhere from Windows 3.1 up to around Windows XP, this should look somewhat familiar because it didn't change all that much. There were a few features added, there were file formats accepted that were not accepted in this version. This only accepts really, really old files. I have an example of one called an Eagle. They use a format called PCX files, and that's what it would do. That was very common back in the day for MS-DOS, as well as some, again, really early Windows programs, Windows 1 and Windows 2. As of Windows 3, I believe they started accepting the BMP format, which is still usable today. And I think it wasn't until Windows 95 that JPEG was added as a format. I could be wrong on that. I don't 100% know. But it was many years later that modern formats like JPEG were added to be able to be displayed. So you can't just take your family's photos that you took on your cell phone and load it in this. It would have to be converted into something, a PCX file, and you would also have to have enough memory to load that file. I tried to do that with one of my photos, and unfortunately the PCX file it turned into was so huge that there was no way the memory that Windows 1.0 could address could actually load that file. And to show you that this was not made by Microsoft, you can see it says PC Paintbrush 1.05 for Microsoft Windows, copyright 1987 ZSoft. They were the folks that actually made this, and Microsoft bought it from them because the software was so popular that they essentially just bought them out and turned it into what we know of as Paint. I'm not going to launch this one because it's not going to play nicely without a mouse, and I don't even know if I can close it without it, but it is a virtual piano software. It does work if you have a mouse, and I have tested it on this little guy I have here. This is a Pocket 8086, and I have Windows 1.0 running on this. It does have a simulated mouse, and that does indeed work, and you can play MIDI-based piano sounds with it. After that, I'm going to skip this folder because it's got a bunch of things in it, so we'll go to that a little bit later. This is a song creating application that if we open it up, the Composer, this application allows you to create music, and you can do it essentially in different, different notes, different speeds, tempos, things like that. It's a music sheet composer, and you can indeed use it to play what you have composed using MIDI, as long as you have a MIDI compatible sound card, an AdLib card installed. I do have one on this, but I don't believe VirtualBox emulates it. If it does, this doesn't support the emulated version of it. You can even see how much memory you have free. In this case, it says I have 284 kilobytes of memory free, which is really probably just what Windows 1 can address, because this VM does have a lot more than 246 megabytes of RAM. There's also a tape deck application that would allow you to play back your music. It, again, unfortunately doesn't work on this VM because it doesn't understand that MIDI translation, if one even exists, in VirtualBox. It also has that wonderful little memory-free thing to tell you how much memory you have. After that, this is one of another small game. It's Taipei. A lot of people know of it as Mahjong these days because Taipei is a form of Mahjong. It's just a really basic game. You could easily get this on modern computers. It's just an old version for Windows 1. And I can even pull it up here. It's actually kind of funny. It was made by a company called Bogus Software. I don't know why they called themselves that, but they existed in 1987, and that's what they called themselves. I'm going to save this for last. It's going to be a funny little thing. Windows Composer is essentially the same thing as Song Creator, so I'm not even going to open that up. It does the same exact thing. This is a modern application, actually. This was ported in 2013 by Joshua Thielen, I will say. I probably got that wrong. Or Nathan Lineback, I'm not sure who actually did it. And it is licensed under the LGPL licenses. It's a modern application that was written for Windows 1.0, and it is a copy of Minesweeper. Yes, it works. Yes, it plays just like the Minesweeper that you had on your computers, and does what it says. The last one is WinGraph, which is a graphing application. All it does is take data that you preset. I won't get into how to do that because it is a quite complicated process, but I will show you what a completed graph would look like because I happen to have a sample graph here. And it just created graphs that you could print. As you can tell, a lot of applications were business-based because computers back in the day, back in 1985, were mostly for businesses. They weren't really for home use quite yet. I know there are some that will say that they had one. I understand. You are the exception, not the rule. Now we're going to go into this folder that I skipped. It's got a bunch of applications in it. Some of them work, some of them don't. This one is 3D tic-tac-toe, and it quite literally is 3D tic-tac-toe. You have to get 4 in a row for this game. It's again one of those very small applications that was created for Windows 1.0 that were games. Boxes, I will not open this one. I will tell you what it does. This app, it's supposed to open boxes slowly on your screen to show the graphical capability, but because this emulates a faster processor, it very rapidly opens boxes. And if somebody has epilepsy, it could trigger that. So I will not open that one. Browser is another application that I'm not really quite sure why this needed to exist. it essentially just opens files. So like I can browse to this and look at its text data. I don't exactly know why on earth I need to do that other than something like Notepad, which could already do that function, but it does exist and it does work. ChessNet is a chess application. Without a mouse, I cannot show you that it works, but it works. I am skipping over this because it crashes Windows. Cube is just a cube. That's all it does. Dialog creates dialogues. This would allow you to create different dialogues in Windows, and actually you could use this to create some applications. It's probably how many of these were created, was by using the Dialog app, as well as another application that I don't remember which one it is in here. There is one other application that is used to do that. This is a cool little one. I'm actually going to use this with my 8086 to create a kind of little digital aquarium, a very nerdy one. This is a Microsoft Fish application that basically just puts a bunch of fish on your screen. I'm going to try to put a whole bunch more, let's say 100 fish. Maybe it won't let me do that in this one. Let's say 99 fish. There, it's a little slower because it's much more data on the screen. And you can see it's just a bunch of fish that runs across your screen. That's all it does. You can even zoom and make it full screen, which is what I plan to do with my digital aquarium. You could also tell it what species. If you only want it to be certain species, you could also have it do that. The person who made this application, this was actually made by Microsoft, this fish application. Ed Fries still works for Microsoft to this day. He was actually one of the leading developers for the original Xbox, and he still works on the development team at Microsoft. At least I think it's the development team to this day. It's kind of crazy that we're looking at one of these really, really old apps that he made 39 years ago. We've got a more complex calculator here. This is a hexadecimal calculator. It calculates hexes. You also have a more complicated calculator. This was based on the Hewlett-Packard mini calculators that used to exist. And this is actually closer to what the modern Microsoft calculator kind of does. It's closer. It's not quite what it does, but it's closer to it. And you can copy paste. I do not exactly know why they did that, where it's got that giant help in there. There's a few apps that have this. This is another application that was created by an individual back in 1987. I suppose this was probably on a BBS somewhere, and I guess it was suggested that you would give him $5. Yeah. Let me go ahead and close out of that. I'm not going to open Flasher. Flasher is another one of those applications that it even warns you in the application, if you have epilepsy, don't use this app. Ironically, you have to open the app to go into the About to get that message. So I'm not exactly sure. Yeah. There's FreeMem, which quite literally just gives you a memory indicator in the lower right hand corner, which is like this. I have to kind of go like that to close it because I don't have a mouse, but it's a memory indicator. Fuse is like a screensaver from back in the day. And Globe is a globe that just rotates. It's also the only application that I found in French. I have no idea why, but it's the only one in French. Back out of that. This will crash computers, so I will not open it. This is a logic game. I do not know how to play it. I know it is a game. This is an annoying little mole that pops up on your screen and doesn't go away until you reboot. As you can see, normally it doesn't do anything, or so it shows it doesn't do anything. And there you go, you can see the little mole pop up. And that'll happen anywhere on the screen, and it's going to keep happening until you reboot. I'm not sure what Slap does. Palette just gives you basically all the color palettes possible of Windows 1.0. Starbase does not work. I don't believe Spy works. One of these does. I don't believe Web or TTT works, so we're not going to try to open them. I do know that this does. This is how to make a Windows 1.0 program. This is quite literally the program creator for Windows 1.0. A Windows program generator for Windows 1.0. This is also a piece of history. This is the very first version of Kermit for Windows. Kermit to this day is still developed by, I believe it is Cornell University. Is it Cornell? Let me look that up. I think it's Cornell. Kermit. Is maintained by Columbia University. It is owned by their research department to this day. It was bought from the authors in the mid-1990s, and to this day it still has versions published on the Columbia website. This is the very, very first version ever created for Windows. It is very rudimentary, and to be honest, it doesn't make any sense for its existence because that terminal application we looked at before has more features than this does. So I'm not exactly sure why they made it, but they did. And then last we have Xword. It's a crossword creating application where you can create your own crosswords and then print them. It is the only purpose of this application to exist. Now last but not least, we have this application that I skipped. I figured this would be a fitting end to it. So what this is it is a birthday cake software. And I'm going to set it up right now. I'm going to add 40 candles and some flashing fireworks. Happy birthday, Windows. I don't know, wait, why didn't it add? Is it because it's, oh, it's because it's capitalized. Happy birthday, Windows. There we go. Happy birthday, Windows. This year marks 40 years. Microsoft Windows came out in November of 1985, and currently at the creation of this video, it is June 14th, 2025, which means this year Windows is 40 years old. It's kind of crazy to think that a lot of the stuff that we used all the way back in 1985 still has some utility and some base in software and computers that we use today. But it does. And these things work even today. If you wanted to write a novel, there's nothing stopping you from using Microsoft Write to do it. If you needed to access terminals like I showed you, you could do that. If you just wanted to play a couple games, they're there. And it's kind of crazy to think that these things, however small and niche this is, they still work today. And these applications can still be run on computers today. I'll even briefly after this show you some of these applications can run on Windows 11 if you have a compatibility layer, a piece of software that translates it into something Windows knows. And it would allow you to use these really, really old applications today and still have functional use out of them. Cancel. I'm going to go ahead and close out of this. So that compatibility layer is known as OTDVM, which is a, people might know what NTDVM is. That is a piece of software that allows you to run 16-bit applications on 32-bit Windows. That does not exist for 64-bit natively. This bridges that gap. So I can go and pull up I think I even still have this in here. I do. So this is actually a clone of the disk that is in here. So all of the applications you just saw are actually on here. They're just located in a different folder right here. So let's go ahead and load that balance of power. And it's telling me this is not fun. I'm going to run it anyway. And look, it works. Let's go into the Windows folder. Let's load up the very first version of Microsoft Write. It works. And it does the same stuff it did on Windows 1.0. I can adjust where the text is on the screen even. That's what these buttons up here do. And you can even print, which this will look at your computer's printer settings and it'll find your printers. I don't know what NE02 is, but I know it corresponds to my IP printer, my network printer that I have. And it will print if I print from that. This is a fully functional text editor that works. And quite a few other apps will still work. One I'm curious to see, I want to see if that birthday cake works on this too. That was in Win1. And then here, Win cake. And indeed it does. It looks very weird because it's not designed to work in a window like that, so I have to kind of shrink it. Settings. $99. And actually, I can add more in this than I could add in the other one. 99, or let's set it to 40. And there you go. And this one actually, because it kind of understands that it's a different resolution, it does let it run larger, because I suppose it was smart enough to understand that even back then if your resolution was larger. But it's kind of crazy. You can even set burning. I can make them be burning. But that's it. Happy birthday, Windows.